What's up, BookTube? I saw this by another BookTuber, and I thought it would be really interesting for me to BookTube about this, and that is literary classics that it feels like everybody else has read, but you have not, or in my case, I have not. And so I decided to take this on, and so I pulled up an article that was actually posted on Goodreads, and it has popular classic literature books. And so I started to scroll through this, and it kind of hit me how many of these that I actually have not read. But at the same time, it was kind of interesting to see a lot of them, well, a few of them at least, that I had read. So I'm just going to go through some of them. I'll go through a few pages here. One is Pride and Prejudice. Have not read that. Next is To Kill a Mockingbird. And I have actually read To Kill a Mockingbird. And that's a book that I read in high school. And I had learned at the time that it was a book that was being banned by a lot of people. And so me being the way that I was at that time, I was kind of like, really? Why are people banning this? And actually, to some extent, I still kind of feel that way. I still just, I mean, I get why some people are uncomfortable with the subject matter of To Kill a Mockingbird, but to me, it was just, I mean, it's a consequential, important story, and it's one of those stories where the movie is outstanding. With Gregory Peck, it's just an outstanding movie that is highly recommended. You know, usually the movie from the book usually doesn't end up being very good. Usually ends up being a very, very, very poor imitation or poor representation of what the book was. But in this case, To Kill a Mockingbird, the movie, is actually really, really good. So you can read or watch in whatever order you want, but they're both really, really good. So next up is The Great Gatsby by F. Scott Fitzgerald, and that would be a no. Never read The Great Gatsby by F. Scott Fitzgerald. Heard so much about it, but never read it. Wuthering Heights by Emily Bronte. Never read it. I've seen it many, many times. I might have a copy in a box somewhere in my garage, but never read it. Here's an interesting one that I read actually recently. I listened to it as an audiobook, and that is 1984 by George Orwell. So that's one that I did listen to recently, and found kind of interesting, actually. I thought it was really good. I had seen it before. I think my brother had a copy of it at some point way back in the day, but in fact, I might actually have his copy somewhere. I didn't even think about that. I may actually have his copy somewhere in one of my boxes in my garage. Let's see. Next up is Frankenstein by Mary Shelley. Never read it, but really do want to read that one for sure. The Catcher in the Rye by J.D. Salinger. Read that in high school. Really, really enjoyed that. It's one of those books, when I read it, I thought I would want to read it again and again and again and again. And for whatever reason, I haven't, even though I did really enjoy it. I think I started to reread it again at some point, but I didn't actually get around to reading it. Romeo and Juliet. I have never read Shakespeare. I feel really weird saying that. That's probably something that would be... But actually, I've never read Shakespeare. I've always wanted to, and I think once I almost read Othello, and I once almost read Macbeth. So maybe if I do actually read Shakespeare at some point, that might be one of those two, or Romeo and Juliet, possibly as well. Could be one that I could end up reading. So. All right, Of Mice and Men by John Steinbeck. I have not read it, but I actually do have a copy of that book. So, yeah, that's kind of interesting that I haven't read it, but I do have a copy of it. The Scarlet Letter, never read that one. Lord of the Flies. I actually have a copy of Lord of the Flies by William Golding. Never read it. Always wanted to read it, but never read it. I think I almost saw the movie at one point, but I never did actually watch the movie as well. Let's see. Tom Sawyer and Huckleberry Finn. Never read either of those two. Always wanted to, but never read them. So I might, if I start a classics TBR, I would say those two would probably be on there. A Tale of Two Cities by Charles Dickens. Nope, have not read that one. What else we got here? Bram Stoker's Dracula. I have not read that one. That's definitely one that I do want to read at some point. So let's see. Yeah. So those are some on the list. The list I saw before had more books on there, like Lolita, which I did actually read, and I did enjoy that one as well. But yeah, it's interesting. Those are a few classics that I have not had a chance to read, and some that I actually have had a chance to read. So it's just interesting that there's so many books that you see that you stumble across when you're in high school, middle school. I talked about on another video. I talked about reading The Outsiders when I think I was in. Maybe might have been a freshman in high school, might have been in middle school when I read The Outsiders by Se Hinton, which was a good book as well. That was one I really enjoyed reading, and it always kind of stuck with me. And almost went on reading on an Se Hinton binge, but I never did. Same with J.D. Salinger. After reading The Catcher in the Rye, I almost went on a big J.D. Salinger binge. And actually, I do have J.D. Salinger's other books. I just have not never really read them, so I got kind of fired up to go on that big binge, and then just kind of like just kind of faded to black there a little bit, so to speak. So anyway, I just wanted to share some of those classic books. And again, the list was posted on Goodreads, and so I saw that, and that combined with what I saw from the other booktuber made me think, yeah, you know what, maybe I should just kind of talk about some of those classic books that others have read, that it seems like everybody's read, but I have not read. And so I'm sure there are many, many, many more out there that could fit onto my list of books that I have not read, but probably should read. I've mentioned in the past not having read Harry Potter books, even though I do have two of them, the first one and the last one. So maybe it might be time to, maybe once a month I'll add at least one classic to my TBR. And actually, if that does become a trend, then you could say it started this month by reading George Orwell's 1984. So anyway, those are some of the classic books that I have not read that it feels like everybody else has read. So that's it here, and if you would please consider hitting the like button for this video, and if you would be so interested in future content in terms of BookTube or AuthorTube, then consider hitting the subscribe button and come back and join me for future content on this channel.